all your enemies. Furthermore, I will tell you that the Lord will build you a house. Here's the promise.
Is translated from a Hebrew word named Berith. Berith was used to mean a covenant between men and men most of the times, but also it was used to mean an agreement between God and man. What is special about an agreement between God and man is that God is faithful and He is always giving freely. So this brings about the character of God, which is love and grace. We see God's character within the covenant basics. And the covenant basics being obedience, because there is a condition, so the condition calls for obedience. And when one is obedient, that means they have faith. So for man to accept God's covenant, he always had to be faithful to God. That means it also calls about a basic of faith. And also we see salvation, because God is always willing to regain his lost people back unto himself. Like we also had like a covenant, marriage covenants. So a man enters a covenant with their wife to be faithful to each other. So whenever we enter a covenant between God, that means we have to be faithful and obedient to God.
Okay, I'm so I'm so moved by the fact that a marriage has to be something that is publicly pronounced. Imagine if people would just go and say, Dara would just come to me and tell me, Miriam, you're my wife from today onwards. My parents don't know, my friends don't know. And tomorrow we just come and announce, oh, yesterday we were married, you know? That would be a covenant that someone can easily break, right? But the covenant of marriage, people come and publicly declare that I love this person, I'm going to live with this person for the rest of my life. You know, it carries more meaning when you actually enter a covenant with someone publicly, rather than when it is just in secret. And so God declares openly that he wants to be what?
In a covenant between.
Yes, he wants us to establish a relationship with him, and his arms are wide open for us. And so I am so glad to see that out of this I learned that God is love, because if God did not love us so much, he was not going to be willing each and every time to enter into a covenant with us and to make sure that he brings us back to himself each and every other time.
Each and every other time.
Yeah.
So we were also asked to look at three elements listed above. That is God's promises. In a covenant of God, of course, God promises something. And if we be faithful, we receive of these promises. Our obedience. So it calls for our obedience. Then in the end, there is always a plan for salvation. Like we saw the covenant with Noah. God came unto Noah and is like, you know what? This earth is going to be, is going to be destroyed by floods. And I'm choosing you to be what? To be saved, you and your family. So Noah was faithful to be chosen by God, and he also took up to be faithful, and he received of this covenant because he was not swallowed by the floods.
Thank you, Brother Isaac. And that is a very good introduction to our next part of the covenants that we're looking at. We're looking at the covenant with Noah. And we see for the first time the word covenant is mentioned in the Bible. in the book of Genesis chapter 6 verse 18. And it says, "But with thee I will establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee." So we see God mentioning for the first time to Noah, or to us, for the first time in the Bible, the word covenant appears. And this is very special because the world at that time was full of sin. And God looked around and he saw, what can I do? So when he looked around, he saw a man who was still faithful, who was still looking up to God. And he said, I will use this man. And this man was called Noah. And even now, God is still looking down on us. He's looking for those who are faithful. He wants to get into a covenant with us. So let us see what happened here. After he sees and identifies Noah, he tells Noah, look, I want to get into a covenant with you. What is the covenant? I am going to destroy the earth. Because the earth is full of sin, I have decided that I will restart it. And because you are faithful and your family, I will save you. But for me to save you, you have to build an ark. Because there's a flood that is coming. And I'm going to pour upon the earth a lot of rain, and by the end of this rain, nothing is going to survive, but only that which is going to be in the ark. And you can see Noah here being obedient to God, because he has never seen rain that has ever flooded the earth, but he believes God. This takes a lot of obedience and trust in God to just go where he calls you. You don't know the place, and you just go because he had says you go or you do this. So we see Noah here, and the writer is asking, was the covenant between Noah and God one-sided? And I would say no, because a covenant is between two people. And if the covenant is between two people, those two people have to what? They have to agree. And Noah, because he trusted in God, he believed and he knew that what he was getting into, when God has said this is going to happen, that is exactly what was going to happen. And so Noah decided to get into this covenant. And God was so faithful enough to make sure that he kept his part of the covenant by keeping Noah safe. When the flood came and went, Noah and his family were safe. When God told Noah to build the ark, Noah did exactly that. He followed all the measurements that were given to him by God to build the ark, and he did. And only those people that went into the ark were what? Were saved. Noah, his family, and all the animals. Every other thing that was on earth, every creeping thing, every animal, every human being, everything perished. But God decided that everyone who is going to uphold to his word is going to survive. Even now, God is doing the same thing for us. And now you find some people arguing that during Noah's time, only a part of the earth was covered by flood. And how can you suspend such arguments? Well, according to me, when I see that there's never been a flood in the whole earth that has ever flooded and destroyed the earth, I know then that this event particularly happened. Why? Because we hear of floods in certain areas. You can hear that there was a flood in Kawempe, there was a flood in this area, that area, in China, in where maybe the ocean was full and the neighboring towns got flooded, but there's never been an occasion where you hear the flood elsewhere and it reaches us. So if the Bible says that the flood was in the whole earth, and there's never been a flood in the whole earth again because God promised, there I know that God is faithful. And I see God's love for me, for you and I, that whenever he promises something, he fulfills. And this is a call to everyone to always trust in God. We should always be obedient and be faithful because God is just. Amen? At this point, I'm going to call for any submissions so far in the lesson. Anyone with any submission? No one with the submission? So we can continue. Brother Isaac,
Yes.
God, apart from Noah, God went into a covenant with Abraham and many other people. We see that God has gone into a covenant with human beings other than Noah and other than Abraham. There are many other people. Can you tell us a bit more about the covenant between Noah, Abraham, and God?
For me, what I'm finding in this lesson is that God is love, because God is always offering us, and it is always upon us to accept or reject. So, God's covenant with Abraham, God comes to Abraham and is like, you know what, Abraham, you're going to have to leave your country, your people, and your everything, and just go to the land that I will give you. Because Abraham was faithful and is the father of the faithful, he accepted and just went. And when he accepted and he was faithful, Genesis 12:1-3 gets us through the promises God made to Abraham. And among these promises are to make him a great nation, to make him a great name, that even if anyone would curse Abraham, they would be cursed, and anyone that would bless him, they will be blessed. What do you think of this? Just in case we accept God's promises and be faithful and believe on him, that means that not at a time we have to worry about anything, because God is going to be our lead and our fighter. So we have to be faithful unto him. There also arose a question of families being blessed under Abraham. All families of the
Amazing facts change lives.
My name is Darius Ziegler. I was in Elmore, Alabama. I grew up and I was raised Christian. We had to do exactly what my parents wanted as far as Christian living, whether it be our friends, what we watched on television, even down to the things that we ate.
You know, I used to wonder and sometimes question things, but, you know, she explained why, you know, like it's better for us, you know, it's the reasons that the way that God actually wants us to live and eat.
And I'm starting to think in my mind, you know, this can't be right. You know, this isn't fair. So, you know, when college came after high school and I was on my own and I busted it wide open. After I had well, at least what I thought, I started to realize that it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. As time of my freshman year of college, I was very miserable. I wasn't happy with anything, and I still wanted to just get away. I was looking through the phone book, you know, I was looking in the back, you know, in the yellow pages, and I seen a recruiting advertisement for the Air Force. I did exactly like the number said. I called them. I'm off to the military. I get there and I made friends. Everybody loved me. At this time, I was just like, yeah, this is what I've been missing. And all these guys doing all this together, it was awesome. or so I thought. They tell us that we're getting deployed. And of all places, we're going to and I'm going to a place to where they don't want us there. Basically, every day your life was on the line, and I'm terrified. Thankfully, after the months go by and we do our tour in the desert, they send us back home. I'm excited. Friends, and I get back there, I get back to my dorm thinking everything is fine, everything's gonna be cool. Something's changed. I'm the only person that's alone. All my friends, they have girlfriends, or they're married, and I'm the odd man out. So I tried to follow suit, and I went out and I met a young lady, and as time went on, we ended up getting married.